The emergency beacon cut through the static like a scream. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from bandaging a colonist's dog and frowned at her communications panel. The signal was close, maybe 10 kilometers into the wilderness beyond Threshold Prime's settlement border. Another crashed transport? She muttered, wiping her hands clean. The dog wagged its tail, oblivious to her concern. She activated the beacon's identification protocol and felt her blood run cold. The readout displayed symbols she recognized from galactic threat briefings. Karvathi. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the comm to alert colony security. Absolutely not, Captain Morrison's voice crackled back after she reported the crash. Doctor, those things are killing machines. We're not sending anyone out there. The ship will self-destruct or he'll die. Either way, problem solved. Sarah stared at the comm in disbelief. There's an injured being out there. We have to help. Morrison laughed, harsh and bitter. Help? Jen, do you know what a Karvathi is? 8 feet of armored death. They've raided 15 human colonies in the past year. Their claws can cut through steel. They eat their enemies, sometimes while those enemies are still alive. I took an oath, Sarah said quietly. All creatures deserve care. Your funeral, Morrison replied and cut the connection. Sarah stood in her empty clinic, listening to the hum of medical equipment. Through her window she could see Threshold Prime's modest buildings, home to 3,000 colonists trying to build new lives on this frontier world. Beyond the settlement, dark forests stretched toward mountains where something was dying. She grabbed her emergency kit, the heavy one designed for large animals. Her hands moved automatically, packing surgical tools, antibiotics, coagulants, and a portable scanner. She told herself she was being logical, professional. The truth was simpler and more complicated. She couldn't leave anything to suffer. The drive into the wilderness took 40 minutes. Sarah's transport bounced over rough terrain, following the beacon's signal. Twice she almost turned back. Once she actually stopped, her hand on the control stick, thinking about Morrison's warnings. Then she remembered a tiger she treated back on Earth, a magnificent creature that everyone said was too dangerous, too wild. That tiger had licked her hand after she'd removed her infected tooth. The crash site appeared suddenly, a scar of burning metal and scorched earth. Sarah stopped her transport a safe distance away and approached on foot, medical kit clutched against her chest like a shield. The smell hit her first, acrid fuel mixed with something organic and sharp. The Karvathi lay half buried in debris. Sarah's first thought was that Morrison hadn't exaggerated. The creature was massive, covered in dark scales that shimmered like oil. 3 parallel jawlines were visible even in his unconscious state, filled with teeth designed for tearing. His claws, each as long as her forearm, were curled against his chest. He was also clearly dying. Green blood pooled beneath him, mixing with leaking fuel. Shrapnel protruded from his side and shoulder. His breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. Sarah knelt beside him, professional instinct overriding fear. She activated her scanner and nearly gasped at the readings. The fuel was toxic to his biology, poisoning him from the inside. The wounds were severe but treatable. It may be 2 hours. Okay, she whispered to herself. You've done stupider things. Remember that time with the bear. She hadn't actually done anything stupider than this. The Karvathi's eyes snapped open, 3 pupils dilating in each eye. His gaze focused on her with terrifying intelligence. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, vibrating through the ground. His claws flexed. Sarah didn't run. She met his eyes and spoke calmly, the way she would to any frightened animal. Easy. I'm here to help. I know you don't understand, but please, let me try. His growl faded. Confusion flickered across his alien features. Then his eyes closed again, consciousness slipping away. Sarah got to work. Getting the Karvathi into her transport was the hardest physical work Sarah had ever done. Even with the cargo winch, his weight made the vehicle's suspension groan in protest. She secured him as best she could and drove back to the colony, her mind racing through treatment options for a biology she barely understood. The clinic's back entrance allowed her to avoid most prying eyes, but word spread fast in small colonies. By the time she had the Karvathi on her largest examination table, reinforced for treating Earth cattle, Captain Morrison was pounding on her door. Open up, Chin. You can't keep that thing here. Sarah engaged the clinic's security locks and ignored him. Through the door, she could hear Morrison arguing with someone else, probably the colony administrator. Their voices faded as she turned her full attention to her patient. The Karvathi's vital signs were failing. Sarah's scanner showed readings that made no sense compared to any Earth animal. His blood chemistry was completely alien, but certain patterns looked familiar. The fuel poisoning attacked his cells like snake venom attacked human tissue. The shrapnel wounds bled like any traumatic injury. She could work with familiar patterns. Sarah started in 4-line, using a solution she'd modified for treating the local herbivores. It was a guess, but doing nothing meant certain death. The Carvathi's arm twitched when the needle went in, his claws extending involuntarily. Each claw could have gutted her with a single swipe. "Stay still, big guy," she murmured, working quickly to remove the shrapnel. "I'm on your side." The largest piece of metal had pierced deep into his shoulder. Sarah used her surgical tools, hands steady despite her racing heart. Green blood welled up, thick and hot. She clamped the wound and began extracting the fragments centimeter by centimeter. The Carvathi's eyes snapped open. His hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist with crushing force. Sarah gasped in pain but didn't pull away. His 3 pupils focused on her face, and she saw intelligence there, along with confusion and rage. "I'm helping you," she said through gritted teeth. "Please understand. I'm helping." For 5 seconds that felt like an eternity, they stayed locked in that position. Then his grip loosened slightly. His eyes moved to the fore, to the surgical tools, to the extracted shrapnel on her tray. He made a sound, low and questioning. "That's right," Sarah said softly. "Medicine. Treatment. You're safe here." He released her wrist and his hand fell back to the table. His eyes remained open, watching her every move. Sarah worked through the night. She removed all the shrapnel and stitched his wounds with dissolving sutures, hoping his body would accept them. The fuel poisoning was harder. She analyzed his blood, compared it to every sample in her database, and created an antidote based on treatments for Earth reptiles and birds. It was a desperate combination of science and intuition. When she injected the antidote, the Carvathi growled but didn't stop her. His eyes never left her face. By dawn, his vital signs had stabilized. Sarah collapsed into a chair beside the examination table, exhausted beyond words. Outside, she could hear colonists gathering, their voices angry and afraid. Morrison was organizing something, probably planning to force his way inside. The Carvathi made a clicking sound. Sarah looked up to find him still watching her. He lifted one massive hand, studied his own claws, then looked back at her. His meaning was clear. He could have killed her a dozen times during the night. "Yeah," Sarah said, managing a tired smile. "I noticed. Thank you for not doing that." He tilted his head, the gesture almost curious. Then he closed his eyes again, his breathing settling into a more peaceful rhythm. Sarah stood and checked her security monitors. A crowd had formed outside, maybe 50 colonists. Some carried weapons. Morrison stood at the front, his face determined and worried. She activated the external speaker. "He's stable. He's not a threat. And I'm not opening this door until you all calm down." Morrison shook his head. "You're protecting a monster, Chin?" Sarah looked back at the sleeping Carvathi. "No. I'm treating a patient." 3 days passed before the Carvathi could sit upright. Sarah had moved him to a reinforced recovery room, once used for injured livestock. He watched her constantly, his triple-pupiled eyes tracking her movements with unnerving focus. On the 4th day he spoke. The words came through a translator device Sarah had salvaged from his ship's wreckage. His voice was deep, resonating through the small room like distant thunder. "Why?" he asked simply. Sarah looked up from preparing his medication. "Why what? Why save me? Humans and Carvathi are enemies. My people have killed yours. I would have killed you if ordered." His claws flexed against the bedding. "You should have let me die." Sarah approached with the medication, moving slowly. "You were hurt. That's all that mattered." He stared at her as if she'd spoken nonsense. "There is no logic in this. Weakness should be eliminated. Enemies should be destroyed. You are weak. I am your enemy. Yet you give your strength to preserve my life." "That's not weakness," Sarah said, administering the injection. "That's called compassion." The translator struggled with the word, cycling through several Carvathi terms before settling on one that made him hiss in confusion. "This word means nothing. Explain." Sarah pulled up a chair, sensing this was important. "On Earth we have dangerous animals. Tigers, bears, wolves. Creatures that could kill humans easily. But when they're hurt we help them heal. Then we release them back to the wild." She showed him images on her tablet. A tiger with a bandaged paw. A bear recovering from surgery. A wolf she'd personally treated for a broken leg. The Carvathi studied each image with intense concentration. "These creatures are apex predators. Like my people." "Yes. And you heal them even though they could kill you? Yes. He was silent for a long moment. My name is Vecthar. I am warrior caste, trained from birth to fight. In my culture, the injured are left to die or killed for mercy. The weak have no value. Compassion, as you call it, is considered a mental defect. Sarah felt a chill. That sounds like a hard way to live. It is the only way I know. Vecthar looked at his clawed hands. But you have shown me something impossible. You faced me, the deadliest thing you will ever encounter, with no weapons. No armor. Only tools for healing. This is either the greatest foolishness or the greatest courage. I cannot determine which. Over the following days, Vecthar began helping around the clinic. His movements were still stiff from healing wounds, but he observed everything. He watched Sarah treat a colonist's cat for an infection. He saw her comfort a child whose pet rabbit had died despite her best efforts. He witnessed her spend hours trying to save a bird with a broken wing. The clinic's animal patients should have feared him. Instead, Sarah's golden retriever approached him cautiously one morning and sniffed his hand. Vecthar froze, uncertain. The dog wagged its tail. She trusts you because I trust you, Sarah explained. Animals sense these things. Vecthar carefully extended one clawed finger and touched the dog's head with surprising gentleness. The dog licked his hand. Something shifted in his alien expression. In my world, this creature would be prey or slave, he said quietly. But you treat her as companion. As valued. She is valued. All life is. Even mine. The question was soft, almost vulnerable. Sarah met his eyes without fear. Especially yours. You're not just a warrior, Vecthar. You're a person. You think, feel, question. That makes you valuable beyond any weapon you could carry. Vecthar stood abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, colonists still watched the clinic with suspicious eyes. They fear me. They are correct to do so. I am dangerous. So is fire, Sarah said. But we don't destroy fire. We learn to understand it, respect it, use it wisely. He turned back to her, and for the first time, something like wonder crossed his features. You are the strangest creature I have ever encountered. And perhaps the bravest. Or the most foolish, Sarah said with a small smile. I begin to think they are the same thing. The night Vecthar declared his life debt, Sarah didn't understand what it meant. He knelt before her in the clinic, his massive frame bowed, and spoke words in his own language that the translator rendered as sacred and binding. When he finished, his expression showed something between honor and horror at what he'd done. No Karvathi has ever sworn this to another species, he explained. My life is now tied to yours. I cannot return to my people unless you release me from this oath. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the formality. Vecthar, you don't owe me anything. I was just doing my job. That is why I owe you everything. 2 weeks later they came for him. Sarah was treating a colonist's horse when her security system screamed an alert. 3 Karvathi drop ships descended from the sky, landing in the open ground beyond the colony's edge. Vecthar was at her side instantly, his body tense and ready despite his still healing wounds. My clan, he said, his voice tight. They have tracked me. Through the clinic's windows, Sarah watched as 12 Karvathi warriors emerged from the ships. They were all like Vecthar, massive and armored, moving with predatory grace. The colonists scattered in panic, and within minutes, Captain Morrison's voice was on every speaker. All civilians to shelters. This is not a drill. The lead Karvathi warrior approached the clinic. His scales were darker than Vecthar's, marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice boomed across the settlement. Vecthar, you have brought shame to our clan by allowing capture. We come to retrieve you and punish those who dared chain a warrior. Vecthar stepped outside and Sarah followed despite his warning growl. The lead warrior's eyes narrowed when he saw her. This human kept you? The warrior's tone mixed disbelief with disgust. This small, weak thing? She saved my life, Commander Zarketh, Vecthar said carefully. I was dying. She healed me. Zarketh laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Then she should have let you die with honor. Now we must cleanse this insult. The colony will burn. The human will die for touching a warrior. You will return home in disgrace. Sarah saw Vecthar's entire body go rigid. For a moment she thought he might actually agree. He had been raised to obey, to follow his culture's harsh rules. But then he did something that shocked everyone present. He stepped in front of Sarah. No, Vecthar said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. 11 Karvathi warriors stared in disbelief. Zarketh's expression darkened with fury. You refuse your commander? You protect a human? I have sworn a life debt to her. She faced the deadliest creature in the galaxy with nothing but the desire to heal. She showed me mercy when I deserved none. She treated me not as a monster but as someone worthy of life. Vectar's voice grew stronger. If you want to harm her or this colony, you must go through me. Zarketh roared in rage. You have lost your mind. She has poisoned you with human weakness. She has shown me something we lost long ago, Vectar countered. Strength without wisdom is just brutality. We call ourselves warriors but we fear the one thing that could make us truly great. Compassion. Zarketh drew his weapon, a wicked blade designed for ritual combat. Then I challenge you. When I win you will die with what remains of your honor. The human and her colony will burn. Vectar accepted, and the two warriors circled each other on the open ground. Sarah wanted to stop it but colonists held her back. This was beyond human intervention now. The fight was brutal and swift. Vectar was still injured, still recovering, but he fought with a purpose Zarketh lacked. When Vectar's claws found Zarketh's throat, he stopped just short of killing. I could end you, Vectar said. But I won't. She taught me that mercy is strength. Zarketh stared up at him, defeated and confused. Slowly, understanding dawned in his eyes. 6 weeks after the challenge, Sarah found the first unexpected visitor waiting outside her clinic at dawn. The Karvathi warrior stood in shadows, clearly trying to avoid being seen. His right arm hung at an awkward angle, broken and poorly set. Vectar intercepted him at the door, speaking rapidly in their language. The warrior responded with shame in his voice. Finally Vectar turned to Sarah. He heard about you from Zarketh's pack. His arm was crushed in battle 3 weeks ago. His own people would kill him for showing weakness, so he traveled here in secret. Sarah studied the warrior's arm and nodded. Tell him to come inside. Word spread through channels the humans didn't understand. 1 wounded Karvathi became 2, then 5, then a dozen. They arrived at night, ashamed but desperate. Warriors with infections that would have killed them. Soldiers with injuries that ended careers. Each one had heard the impossible story about a human who healed the deadliest species in the galaxy. Sarah's clinic became a strange sanctuary. She worked 18-hour days, learning Karvathi biology through trial and practice. Vectar translated and assisted, his presence making the other warriors trust her enough to accept treatment. The colony adjusted slowly. Fear turned to curiosity when the Karvathi patients helped repair buildings and shared their technology as payment. Captain Morrison remained skeptical but couldn't argue with results when one grateful warrior fixed the colony's failing water system in an afternoon. 3 months after Vectar's arrival, something unprecedented happened. A Karvathi female appeared at the clinic carrying a small bundle. Inside was a Karvathi infant, barely a month old, running a dangerous fever. Please, the mother said through Vectar's translation, her voice breaking with emotion. I heard you save lives. My daughter is sick. Our healers say she is too weak, that she should be allowed to die. But I cannot accept this. Sarah looked at the tiny creature, no bigger than a human newborn, and felt her heart clench. Bring her inside. Quickly. The procedure took 4 hours. The infant had a severe infection that Sarah treated with modified antibiotics. When the baby's fever broke and she began crying with healthy lungs, the mother collapsed in relief. She looked at Sarah with wonder and something else. Gratitude that transcended species. You saved my child, she whispered. You gave value to a life my own people would have thrown away. News of the infant's survival reached the Karvathi homeworld. The response was divided. Traditional warriors called it shameful. But parents, especially mothers who had lost children to the old ways, began to question. If humans could save Karvathi lives that their own culture deemed worthless, what did that say about their traditions? A year after the crash, Sarah stood in her expanded clinic, training 3 other human veterinarians in xenobiology. Vectar worked beside her, no longer just a patient or assistant but a partner in building something new. Outside, Karvathi and human children played together under the watchful eyes of both species. The Galactic Council took notice. Humanity's application for advanced diplomatic status, previously denied, was suddenly approved. The reason given was simple. Any species that could change Karvathi culture through compassion alone was too dangerous to ignore and too valuable to dismiss. Sarah received awards and recognition that embarrassed her. She refused most interviews and declined a position at the Galactic Medical Academy. Her place was here in this small clinic, treating whoever came through her door. One evening Vectar found her sitting outside, watching the sunset. He settled beside her, his massive frame somehow peaceful. Do you know what they call you on the homeworld? He asked. Probably something insulting. The foolish healer. They mean it as mockery, but young Karvathi are starting to use it differently. As a title of respect. Sarah smiled. I've been called worse. You changed everything, Vector said quietly. One act of foolish kindness and now our entire culture is questioning itself. Parents demand better for their children. Warriors seek purpose beyond killing. All because you refused to let me die. I just did what was right. That is why it worked. Vector looked at the stars beginning to appear. We thought humans were weak and foolish. We never knew that foolishness could be the greatest wisdom of all.